Let's get it. Heart throb never.
Accusations of victim Olympics and grifting. We have this dynamic of people who don't want to hear about the serious talking points, the decades-long talking points of American black people in regards to slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, lynchings, all of that stuff. You know, the normal oppressive obstacles that American blacks have had to deal with. But we have the dynamic of individuals who don't want to hear those talking points, or they think that the talking points are exaggerated. They have for a long time been calling American black people who bring up these issues, stating that they've contributed to disenfranchisement of American black people and contributed to their low status in society, low economic status, low power status, low access to resources. These dissenters or the opposition uses these two tactics of victim Olympics, saying that American blacks want to play the victim Olympics, and that American blacks who bring up these talking points to strategize against people who want to neutralize their talking points in their efforts to gain, some type of legislative footing for their ethnicity, calling them grifters. I think that's a real wicked and a real sneaky way to try to defeat the talking points, of history that is factual. Like this is what's crazy, is that someone will create terminology. Let's just examine it. Victim Olympics. That's a real degrading terminology, real sneaky way to try to shut somebody up. Can you imagine that anyone would say that to members of a specific community that make sure, and not that they shouldn't, but that make sure that no one ever forgets what happened to them in another country by their own citizens of that country. Can you imagine what would be said if someone accused them of playing the victim Olympics because of what happened to them? I was looking at a piece of video content on a couple musician producers, old school music producers, and they were born in 1948, and one of them died in 2006. So from 1948 to 2006, I guess the point that I'm making is that 1948 isn't that long ago. Yeah, it is, if you're, in terms of human years, but man, like a person born in 1948, and that would make him 58 years old. But we know what happened around that time of 1948. Like before that, the war was going on. And so these heinous crimes are going on 1940 through, however long that went on, late 30s all the way through. But to imagine telling these people that they're playing the victim Olympics when they bring that up, which they do. So Jim Crow, segregation, lynchings, redlining, flooding towns, all that stuff was going on from 1800s all the way through to in mass activity all the way up to 1980s, 90s. And we still have echoes of it still happening. And so when American blacks see these things happen, and then they talk about it out of, their attempts to stand up against it and to be vocal about it, they're called persons playing the victim Olympics. When you still have the racism and the hatred against this ethnic group continuing in 2024. And so people will say, well, what's the point of bringing it up? Well, it's going to keep getting brought up because it hasn't stopped. Like if you're tired of hearing about it, get with your people and make them stop what they're doing. But as I said before, you're not going to do that because you're for it. And then you think that by trying to censor, just like social media platforms censor people in their opinions and ideologies, which may not be true or may be true. But the complaints that American blacks have about racism and hatred against them, that's not false. That's true. See, if it was false, you'd have a point. If there was no history of that, you'd have a point. But there is history of it, and it's not false. So you use these strategies to try to stop American blacks from being vocal about it and bringing continued attention to what was done. A real sneaky tactic. Then the other tactic is this whole thing of calling someone a grifter, particularly American blacks who create platforms to bring strategic awareness to what's going on and come up with ideas and ways to effectively counter these racist ideologies and racist tactics against American blacks. You'll call these people a grifter, which I guess means trying to monetarily benefit from the fact that people will be upset about hearing about these things and try to extract money from the listeners who are adversely affected by hearing of stories and things that are used against American blacks. That's another sneaky tactic. Because from my perspective, it's all both of those tactics, the usage of the words of the phrase victim Olympics and the term grifting or grifter, those two phrases are used to, like I said, neutralize and kind of make obsolete anyone trying to talk about the injustices done against American blacks. The same way that the thing against critical race theory. Now, I don't so much agree with critical race theory because, as I understand it, there were things being put in in this thing that they wanted that they were attaching all sorts of other non-American black issues to critical race theory. So I get why they wanted to shut that down. But for those who wanted to shut it down simply because American blacks are talking about their history and the atrocities committed against them and their ancestors, that's another tactic of trying to censor and shadow ban American blacks discussing and making aware the public and their own people, their offspring, their descendants of these atrocities that have happened to them. So telling American blacks that they shouldn't be talking about it, that's criminal. Because what you're telling them is that they shouldn't be informing their children and younger people of the atrocities that happened to them. You see, once you look at this, there's really no way around recognizing these strategies and tactics to silence American blacks about their mistreatment. There's no other way to look at it. It's demonic. It's still racist. It's still supremacist. It's still evil. That there's this much disdain and hatred directed towards a people who have done nothing to the people who want to destroy them. And if we keep talking about this, at some point it's going to stop. But the question is, why do you want to shut it down? Why is everyone else allowed to talk about what happened to them, but American blacks ought to shut up and be quiet? Explain that. Leave it in the comments or whatever you want to do. But this is just a confusing sort of, reality of it. You see every day, all year long, every year, that American blacks are still being mistreated. There are still towns in the United States that are all white and that will murder a black person for being caught in their town, period. Vidor, Texas, that's one place and got 1 million more. But American blacks are supposed to run around here and say that racism and hostilities and aggressions against them don't exist. And then you use the terms victim Olympics or grifters to try to make obsolete their talking points and their reality. Real sneaky and demonic of you. But Dare you to leave a comment. Change my mind on this. I doubt that you can. I'm out.
Heart throb never.